If you thought this week was going to be calm, I've got some sobering news for you. What's about to unfold across nearly half this country is nothing short of meteorological chaos, wrapped up in a system so powerful and so relentless that it's earned a nickname that honestly gives you chills when you think about what it represents. We're talking about something called the Ring of Fire, and what it's about to do over the next 72 hours is going to reshape the landscape, test emergency response systems, and put millions of people into a state of heightened alert. This isn't hyperbole. This is the real deal, and we need to talk about exactly what's coming. For the next couple of days, we're looking at a scenario that meteorologists have been tracking intensely, watching computer models align in ways that all point toward one conclusion. Mother Nature is about to throw everything she's got at the Midwest and the Ohio Valley. Picture this massive high-pressure system that's currently sitting over Texas like some kind of stationary monster that's not just creating hot, stagnant air down south. No, it's doing something far more sinister. It's acting as a forcing mechanism, essentially spinning weather systems around it like water circling a drain. And where those systems meet the edge of that high pressure is exactly where the atmospheric conditions become absolutely primed for explosive severe weather development. Starting right now, as we head into the rest of today and beyond, we're already seeing storm systems firing up across Iowa with some genuinely impressive, damaging wind potential. We're not talking about typical afternoon thunderstorm winds. We're talking about gusts that have already reached 90 miles per hour in places like Broken Bow, Nebraska, overnight. Those wind events are currently sweeping across central and eastern Illinois as we speak, and they're going to continue their march southeastward through Kentucky well into the afternoon hours. The threat profile here includes isolated tornado potential, which means despite these winds being the primary concern, we absolutely cannot discount the possibility of a spin-up tornado or two happening as this line of storms continues to organize and move through these regions. Now here's where it gets really concerning, and this is something that demands your full attention if you're anywhere in that impact zone. Beyond just the severe wind threat, we're dealing with the potential for some genuinely dangerous hail development, particularly out toward western Nebraska, where supercells are expected to develop later this afternoon. We're talking baseball-sized hail emerging from the most vigorous updrafts. That's not just property damage territory, that's life-threatening territory. And when hail of that magnitude starts falling, it doesn't discriminate. Your roof, your windows, your car, anything exposed to the elements becomes a target. But here's what makes this entire pattern so uniquely dangerous and so different from your typical spring severe weather outbreak. This isn't a fast-moving system that tears through the region and then clears out. This is a quasi-stationary setup where that ring of fire effect means we're going to get repeated rounds of thunderstorms. Think about it like this. The atmospheric machinery is going to keep churning out storms one after another, sometimes in the exact same corridors where storms just rolled through hours before. That's where we get into truly hazardous flash flooding scenarios, and that's exactly what we're anticipating to develop overnight tonight and into tomorrow morning. The rainfall situation across Indiana and parts of the Ohio Valley is genuinely alarming from a hydrological perspective. We've already seen widespread accumulations of 5 to 10 inches across portions of Indiana from yesterday's activity alone. That's not typical afternoon thunderstorm rainfall. That's the kind of totals you see during tropical systems or major frontal boundaries. And now, as moisture keeps wrapping around this massive heat dome, we're expecting an additional 3 to 6 inches, and in some of the most localized spots, potentially even 7 to 8 inches or more of additional rainfall. When you layer that on top of what's already fallen, you're not just talking about minor creek rises. You're talking about the potential for widespread flash flood emergencies, the kind of situations where roads become rivers, where vehicles get swept off roadways, and where water rescue operations become absolutely critical. The specific corridor of greatest concern for this additional heavy rainfall stretches from Davenport, Iowa, all the way eastward toward Cincinnati, Ohio. Cities like Des Moines, Indianapolis, and Lafayette are all sitting within that dangerous rainfall probability envelope. The models have been hinting that the bullseye for the heaviest rain could shift geographically as the system evolves, which actually means that any county from roughly western Nebraska all the way through eastern Illinois and into Kentucky could potentially experience that localized extreme rainfall situation. That uncertainty is part of what makes this forecast challenging, but it's also exactly what keeps meteorologists glued to their monitoring systems, continuously updating the forecast as new data comes in and as these storm systems continue their evolution. Moving into tomorrow, Friday brings a continuation of this active pattern, just slightly different in character, but absolutely no less dangerous. We're expecting what we call another marginal risk of severe weather stretching from Denver through Chicago all the way eastward into eastern Virginia. The damaging wind threat remains the primary concern across this entire zone, but what distinguishes Friday from today is an elevated tornado threat, particularly across portions of northern Illinois and into Iowa. The Storm Prediction Center is highlighting areas like Des Moines, Ames, and Cedar Rapids as regions where isolated tornadoes could develop, and while the probability remains relatively low on the overall scale. The fact that we're even discussing tornado potential on 2 consecutive days in this part of the country speaks volumes about how energized the atmosphere has become. What's also distinct about Friday's setup is that we're continuing to expect heavy rainfall development, potentially even more organized than what we saw Thursday night into Friday morning. There are hints in some of the higher resolution model guidance that another mesoscale convective system, essentially a large organized cluster of thunderstorms with a well-defined structure, could develop somewhere over Kentucky during the very early morning hours. Then, as we push into the afternoon and evening, there's uncertainty about whether another line of storms might fire up over Missouri and Iowa and track eastward through Illinois, potentially toward the Chicago area, though that threat would mostly materialize as a late-night event. The uncertainty here is genuine, and it's something that makes forecasting this event challenging in the details, even though the big picture is incredibly clear. Some of our most advanced models are painting one picture, while other equally respected models are showing something slightly different timing-wise. By the time we get beyond Friday, once the system starts to push farther eastward, we're going to have much better clarity on exactly which specific solutions are going to verify. But for right now, at this moment, Friday looks like another day where anybody who lives in the Great Plains or the Midwest needs to take this seriously and stay weather aware. The Great Plains region more broadly, including areas from Colorado clear up into North Dakota, is going to experience scattered shower and thunderstorm activity throughout this entire 2-day period. The primary hazard there is isolated damaging wind gusts, though some locations might pick up some smaller hail as secondary impacts. But for the most part, these storms are providing what would normally be considered beneficial rainfall to the region. In any other circumstance, that would be welcome news. But in this case, we're more concerned about the organized severe weather associated with the strongest storms and that front and center wind hazard in the primary zones. Now let's pivot to what Saturday and Sunday look like, because while the intensity is going to diminish from the absolutely maxed out severe weather threat we're seeing Thursday and Friday, there's still plenty of activity on the menu. Saturday across the Midwest could bring another round of severe weather development, though there's more uncertainty surrounding exactly how organized and how strong that activity will be. Some model solutions suggest pretty limited severe weather potential on Saturday, while others keep things a bit more active. It's one of those forecast conundrums where we're going to have to watch this situation closely as Thursday progresses and we gather more observational data. Late Saturday pushing into Sunday, we're likely to see yet another line of organized thunderstorms pushing across the Central Plains, and particularly if those storms organize well, we could see some damaging wind gusts developing there too. By Sunday itself, the forecast really starts to become murky. There's genuine uncertainty about where the most intense storm activity is going to set up and what regions are going to end up in the crosshairs. Some solutions suggest we could see some storm activity anywhere from the Carolinas clear up into New England. Other model guidance suggests the primary activity stays out in the Midwest again, though the odds of that seem a little bit lower given the evolution of the overall pattern at that point. What's important to understand about this Friday through Sunday period is that beyond Thursday night into Friday morning, this heavy rainfall event, there are going to be additional moisture-rich atmospheres in place, and there's potential for more heavy rainfall development on subsequent days. Though the coverage probably won't be quite as widespread and the rainfall totals might not be quite as impressive as what we were expecting to see in the near-term window. But that doesn't mean we should be dismissive of it. In regions that have already received those 8, 9, even 10-inch rainfall totals, even 2 or 3 more inches can tip things from manageable into absolutely catastrophic from a hydrological standpoint. Rolling into next week, Monday and Tuesday, bring a distinctly different weather pattern into play. We're no longer talking about that ring of fire configuration. Instead, we've got a new weather system that's going to be approaching from a more northwesterly direction, bringing moisture and instability from a different source region. You can think of it as air flowing down from Canada and out of the northwest, bringing an entirely different character to the ongoing unsettled pattern. We're still expecting showers and thunderstorms to continue, but they're going to be part of a different overall weather system and driven by different atmospheric dynamics. The GFS model is indicating that these systems will potentially bring their own round of thunderstorms into the Midwest, though, again, we're probably not going to see the kind of organized severe weather setup that we have in place for Thursday and Friday. Beyond Monday and Tuesday, as we head into the middle and end of the week, the forecast uncertainty starts to really expand. What we can say with reasonable confidence is that there's going to be a continuation of shower and thunderstorm activity, stretching from Colorado and Kansas all the way back up into Wisconsin and Michigan. But the details of exactly where the strongest storms will be, how organized they'll become, and which specific regions are going to end up seeing the most significant impacts becomes increasingly difficult to nail down. That's just the nature of extended forecasting, and it's something we'll have much better clarity on once we get closer to those days. Now, we absolutely cannot ignore what's happening out in the Atlantic Basin right now because tropical activity is waking up in a way that deserves our attention and our monitoring. Currently, we have Tropical Storm Cristobal, which is our third named storm of the Atlantic hurricane season. Unfortunately, Cristobal is already weakening and essentially done as a significant weather maker. But what's much more important than Cristobal are the two areas of tropical concern that are going to potentially develop into significant systems over the next week or so. The first area we're watching has an 80% probability of becoming a tropical system within the next 48 hours. This system is positioned just east of the Lesser Antilles and has all the ingredients for development. Computer models are suggesting that it will likely become our next named storm, continuing the progression through the Atlantic hurricane season's naming list. Most guidance suggests it will remain relatively weak, on the order of maybe a weak tropical storm, partially because wind shear in the Atlantic is relatively substantial right now due to what we call an El Niño pattern being in place. But that said, even a weak tropical system can bring tropical downpours to the Lesser Antilles, and any enhancement toward tropical storm status means we're talking about stronger winds and more impactful conditions for those island communities. The second system we need to watch is positioned even farther east, out toward the African continent, and it has about a 50% probability of becoming a tropical system over the next 7 days. This one is a little bit different in terms of its forecast confidence and its potential development path. The wind shear is expected to be slightly lower by the time this system gets far enough along in its development, which means there is at least a little bit of an elevated likelihood that it could potentially strengthen to a stronger tropical storm or even approach hurricane status. However, and this is a critical qualifier, we're still dealing with probabilities here and nothing has developed yet, so there's legitimate uncertainty about whether this system will even materialize into anything noteworthy. The critical takeaway for anybody living in the mainland United States or even in the Caribbean is that the tropical threat to our land areas remains extremely low at this moment. Even when you look at the entire ensemble of model guidance, we're talking about only one outlier member out of dozens and dozens of individual ensemble members that shows any approach to the United States at all. That's genuinely reassuring, and it means you shouldn't be losing sleep over some catastrophic tropical impact in the near-term window. However, and this is the flip side of that coin, if you live in the Lesser Antilles, you absolutely should be maintaining a high state of alert. For the next 5 to 7 days, tropical activity is definitely a possibility, and those island communities need to stay on top of the forecast updates as these systems develop and their paths become clearer. Here's what's really important to understand about this entire setup and what makes it so meteorologically significant. We have this combination of elements that just doesn't come together all that frequently. You've got the heat dome, which is keeping energy bottled up over the south and southeast. You've got this ring of fire effect, which is basically using that heat dome as a pivot point and spinning storm systems around it. You've got abundant moisture wrapping around that system from the Gulf of Mexico and from the Atlantic. You've got wind shear that's oriented in just the right way to support organized severe weather development. And you've got a lack of upper-level divergence in the right areas, meaning air can continue to rise and fuel the development of these storms. When all of those elements align, when they all point in the same direction, that's when you get the kind of situation we're looking at right now. The impacts of this weather pattern are going to be felt most acutely across the Midwest and the Ohio Valley, but the effects aren't going to be limited to just those regions. The heat dome is going to persist across the south and southeast, meaning those areas are going to continue to experience oppressive heat, even as the Midwest is dealing with this severe weather onslaught. The tropics are going to remain active with development potential, and the unsettled pattern is going to continue to press eastward as the week progresses, bringing shower and thunderstorm potential into areas that might not have significant weather impacts from this particular system. If you're in any of the affected areas, and particularly if you're in Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, or parts of Nebraska, you need to take this forecast seriously. This isn't one of those situations where there's some minor threat that you can kind of keep in the back of your mind. This is a situation where you need to actively monitor weather updates. You need to have multiple ways to receive weather alerts, and you need to have a plan in place for how you're going to react if warnings are issued for your specific location. The most critical safety message we can emphasize right now, particularly as we look at the flooding threat, is this. If you encounter water covering a roadway, do not attempt to drive through it. This isn't just a suggestion. This is based on decades of emergency management data showing that a massive proportion of weather-related fatalities occur when people try to drive through flooded roads. The water may look manageable, but it's deceptive. It takes far less water than you'd think to sweep a vehicle off a roadway. And once a vehicle is in moving water, the situation becomes life-threatening incredibly quickly. Turn around, don't drown. That's not just a catchy phrase. That's genuine life-saving advice. Similarly, if a tornado warning is issued for your location, you need to immediately seek substantial shelter. That means getting to the lowest level of a sturdy building, getting to an interior room away from windows, and staying there until the warning expires. If you're in a mobile home or a building that's not particularly sturdy, don't wait. Get out and seek better shelter immediately. And if you're outdoors and see a tornado, or even suspect tornado conditions are developing, your priority is to move perpendicular to the tornado's path, if you can do so safely. Getting toward low-lying terrain, like a ditch, can provide some protection from the most violent winds. And what we're going to see develop over the next 72 hours is going to be fascinating from a meteorological perspective, but it's also going to be profoundly impactful for millions of people. Emergency response systems are going to be stretched. Utility companies are going to be busy responding to damage from damaging winds and flooding. Transportation corridors are going to be compromised by floodwaters and debris. And individuals and families are going to be making life-affecting decisions about where to shelter, how to protect their property, and when it's safe to be outdoors. The forecast confidence for this overall pattern is actually quite high, particularly for the Thursday and Friday severe weather and flooding threats. We're not dealing with a marginal situation here where multiple solutions are pointing in wildly different directions. The models are in relatively good agreement that organized severe weather is coming, that heavy rainfall is going to develop, and that the impacts are going to be significant. Where the uncertainty does exist is in the fine details. Exactly which corridor gets the heaviest rainfall. Exactly. Where the strongest damaging winds will be. Exactly which locations will experience tornado activity. Those details matter enormously for emergency managers and for individuals trying to prepare, and that's why continued monitoring and updated forecasts will be so critical over the next couple of days. I want to emphasize something important here. Weather forecasting is not an exact science, despite what some people might think. We have incredibly sophisticated computer models, we have vast amounts of observational data, and we have decades of meteorological knowledge informing our predictions. But at the end of the day, we're trying to predict the behavior of a chaotic system. The atmosphere doesn't always cooperate with our expectations. A storm might intensify more than we anticipated. A system might shift 10 or 20 miles from where the models suggested it would be. A particular region might get twice as much rain as we were expecting, or half as much. Those kinds of variations are the reality of weather forecasting. And they're exactly why staying informed and being prepared is so important. As we head into this period of heightened weather activity, make sure you've got reliable ways to receive weather information. That could mean downloading a weather app, having a battery-powered or hand-crank weather radio, having emergency alerts enabled on your smartphone, or having a television that's tuned to weather information. Whichever method works best for you, make sure you've got backup options. If power goes out, your internet might go out too. If you're driving, you might not have cell service. Having multiple ways to access weather information significantly increases the odds that you're going to stay informed when conditions are most dangerous. Think about your specific location and your specific situation. If you live in an area prone to flooding, do you know which routes in your area tend to flood first? Are you aware of which areas around you are at higher elevation and would be safer in a flooding situation? If you live in a mobile home or a structure that's not particularly robust, do you know where you can seek substantial shelter? If you live alone or have family members with mobility challenges, have you thought through how you're going to get to safety quickly if a warning is issued? These kinds of personal preparation steps might seem like overkill in normal times, but when you're in the crosshairs of a significant weather event, being prepared makes the difference between a scary experience and a catastrophic one. The broader picture we're dealing with is a weather pattern that's energized and active in ways that will take several days to fully play out. The heat dome's persistence is going to create an ongoing source of instability. The continued moisture advection around that system is going to keep atmospheric humidity elevated and rainfall potential high. And the wind shear profile that's in place is going to support organized storm development. Those elements, in concert with each other, mean we should expect an extended period of unsettled weather across much of the country, not just a single day or two of severe weather followed by clearing. Looking at the overall progression of this pattern, what we're really talking about is a multi-day event that's going to challenge forecasters, challenge emergency managers, challenge utility companies, and challenge individuals and families to stay alert and take necessary precautions. This is the kind of weather event that has the potential to make headlines not because it's unusual, but because of the cumulative impacts of repeated severe weather and heavy rainfall over a relatively short period of time. The most important thing you can do right now is to stay aware, stay informed, and stay prepared. This forecast is going to evolve over the next couple of days as new data comes in and as these storm systems begin to develop. Updated forecasts will become more detailed and more certain about specific impacts in affected areas. Use those updates to refine your personal preparedness plans and to stay ahead of developing situations. This is a weather event that deserves respect. It has the potential for significant impacts. It has the potential to create dangerous and life-threatening situations for people caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. But with proper awareness, proper preparation, and proper decision-making when warnings are issued, you can dramatically reduce your personal risk and help ensure that you and your loved ones make it through this period safely. Stay weather aware, stay informed, and most importantly, stay safe.